We have come to the last award before the interval. This is a special part of the night where we honour the 2024 Te Whare Taonga, Puoro or Aotearoa inductee. This award goes to someone who has given a lifetime of work to music.
This year's recipient is the legendary Mike Nock. Mike has an extraordinary catalogue spanning years, decades, playing on over 40 records of differing genres.
To usher Mike Nock into the Hall of Fame, please welcome to the stage poet, writer and music enthusiast Greg O'Brien.
Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora e hoa, Mike Nock. For me, this began one night in the early 1980s while employed as a dishwasher in the underground kitchen of the Sydney jazz club, The Basement. I heard the opening bars of Mike Nock's Land of the Long White Cloud wending their way from the Yamaha Grand on the stage up through the swing doors of the kitchen. Temporarily on leave from a stellar career in the Northern Hemisphere, Mike was in town. Aged 20, I had recently fled from Auckland to Sydney to escape Rob Muldoon-era New Zealand and to acquire a real education. I soon found Mike Nock's music, both live and recorded, asserting itself as a central pillar of the subsequent learning. Our paths crossed again at the end of that decade, back in the jazz and dishwashing mecca of Sydney, when I interviewed Mike for Music in New Zealand magazine on the occasion of his pending 50th birthday. At the time, I thought of him as the grand old man of New Zealand jazz. He was still in his 40s. He had just moved to Sydney, or West Auckland, as it was often called. Having caught the ferry across the harbour, what first struck me upon entering his modest apartment was the overwhelming presence of a grand piano about the size of a four-door family car, which took up every available inch of the living room. Accordingly, the interview was conducted on the nearest seating in the kitchen. Mike and I have caught up many times over the years, often in the company of our dancer, choreographer, filmmaker friend, Sue Healy, and sister. Visiting Mike last June, I noted how the layout of his and Yuri's current home in the Sydney suburb of Ashfield is pretty much identical to the earlier dwelling. The grand piano still at the centre of the living room. The piano is the centre of the house, as it is of Mike's world. In fact, his truest address is the grand piano. This is where he lives. It is the air he breathes. I imagine him sleeping inside it and therein entertaining contrapuntal musical dreams. If you want an embodiment of the life of a truly committed, deeply creative artist, a visionary, an exemplar, look no further than Mike. As Ralph Halteri is to our visual arts and Janet Frame to our literature, so Mike is to our music. His artistic imagination traverses the globe like a complex weather system, gathering force along the way, encompassing American jazz tradition, European concert hall, the Pacific archipelago, and his hometown of Narua. Tonight we acknowledge the life's work of a musician and a composer, a soloist, band leader, teacher, collaborator, and freewheeling creative spirit. The grand old man I once hung out with is now a genuinely impressive 84 years of age, but still playing with a youthfulness which I can only describe as outrageous. Tonight we celebrate the ongoing, irrepressible youth of Mike Nock, a citizen of the universe and an unreconstructed Waikato boy, a hard-working individual who is avowedly one of the people, a rebel who is also a kaumatua, a guiding light. We are all dishwashers in the underground kitchen of life, but if we listen closely, we might be lucky enough to hear a few bars of Mike Nock's music wafting through from some adjacent space, elevating us, lifting us up out of the basement, throwing open all the windows and doors, taking the roof off the building and the lid off the world as we know it. The sky is the limit, but it is no limit at all. Now we're going to listen to some other viewpoints of this great man.
Said that there's a certain New Zealandness in my music. You know, just the physical country. You know, the rivers, the water, the mountains. Jazz is an attitude. It's an attitude towards life, and it's all about the pursuit of truth. What's real? I mean, we need this in today's world. I mean, more than ever, this immediate emotional connection that transcends the music on the page.
He is so written into the history of jazz itself in the world, and that is an extraordinary thing. He is indomitable and he's unique. It's a Hall of Fame, it's where he should be.
Do you think Mike is New Zealand's greatest jazz export? Maybe he's New Zealand's best musical export. You know, he's a phenomenal person and musician and player, and a career that long and that consistent. He's just had this enormously creative life.
He has endless resources of ingenuity in his own playing, his devising of melodies and harmonies, his extraordinary rhythmic command. But this even bigger, more profound issue, you hear this musician and then you hear them play with Mike and you think, oh, I didn't know they were that good.
Mike had a way of bringing things out of people. He could get players to play, and he'd say to you, I want you to play, like Monk said, play my piece, don't just play generic.
I always think of spaciousness when I think of Mike's playing, and it's extremely groovy, but it's also really free and it's very liberal. It is kind of the epitome of that thing that you maybe can't be taught.
Mike really is the fourth member of a quartet of truly great pianists, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock and Keith Jarrett.
The 50s and 60s were the real heyday of jazz here in New Zealand, and it was during that time that Mike Nock of Aotearoa discovered that it was his kind of music. He went to study in the United States on a scholarship.
This is the place I used to live. That's it. That's it right there, man. Damn, it's going back.
Mike surely has bragging rights to say that this whole idea of jazz fusion, that with Fourth Way, he's one of the innovators of that, in the sense that he didn't come to it because Miles had done it. He was doing it.
The music they played was rock, raw guts. It was mathematical formulas with an earthly meaning. It was patterns of mirth, floating out to posterity to linger forevermore. The Fourth Way were praising the God of music, the God of earth, and the God of love. The musicianship displayed and the music they invented actually elevated them onto another plane from myself. The walls opened up. time became timeless, and the universe was theirs.
What he has given is the willingness to integrate and to collaborate through the years with New Zealanders in New Zealand in different situations. So he's always giving that back. He's inspired so many, like myself. Like I consider Mike a mentor to me. You know, when I was in New York doing the hard yards, you know, I'd ring up Mike. You know, I'd been there maybe 2 years and it was like pretty hard going. So he's always supported. What he's given is the beauty of his music.
Working with Mike is a revelation. He's a master composer for improvisers, but he's also a pretty useful one when it comes to writing for a string quartet or an orchestra.
The experience of working with Mike was really wonderful, and how our two sort of worlds came together actually very naturally. That he wrote that in response to the earthquakes. As a musician coming to it, that sort of subtext wasn't necessarily part of our awareness, which is kind of interesting. So the inspiration is one thing, but then it's our expression of what Mike has written and how we worked together with him. Now, looking back on that time, was just the wonderful joy that he brings to everything he does. A sense of possibility all the time.
I got to know Mike well in the mid-2000s when I was working on his biography. Mike can be quite an intense guy, and sometimes the conversations were pretty full on. But I vividly remember how Mike would be telling me about Sam Rivers or the vicissitudes of life in New York during the 60s, and he'd suddenly remember some crazy thing that had happened and we'd fall about laughing. Mike Nock's a great guy and he's a wonderful musician, and I think a big part of that is his joie de vivre, the sort of irrepressible love of life and sense of joy.
Mike's definitely taught me like a lightheartedness but also a seriousness, and that comes from just so many nights where I've gone over to Mike's place at like 3 p.m. and left after midnight because we've just been sitting there talking about music so intensely without either of us realizing what time it is. Because with Mike you end up talking about the music a lot. What's the music asking for?
A blessed life. It has been a blessed life, whatever happens. And music has been very much an enabler of that life being blessed. Wow, this is kind of the culmination of a lot of things. It really does situate me back home. This is my roots, this is me. This is who I am. Thank you for this wonderful honor.
Okay. Let me introduce you to Mike Nock himself.
One of the few times in recent years I'm speechless. So thank you very much. That's all I can say. It's wonderful. It's beyond anything. Thank you very much for coming out and everyone has done everything here. Wow. And thank you, New Zealand. Yeah.
Mike Nock.